Share your screen. Yeah, share screen would be good. Share screen. Select window or screen. There. That one. Allow. So we really need that, but I'm going to try and do it this way. Alright, so it seems that I am live. Hopefully my whole thing won't crash. I don't need to use the chat. Just let me know in YouTube if I'm coming through okay or not. And the same, a bit of tension here, a bit short of breath. It's just the technology, like the, the kind of multitasking I have to do, making me a little bit anxious, to be honest. But I'm glad to say it's not self-consciousness or stage fright, because I think I'm pretty much through that phase in my life. A little late, you could say, in your 50s before you get over being self-conscious, but anyway, better late than never. Okay, so I got a thumbs up from Blue Ye Devil, so I assume that thumbs up means that I'm working on YouTube, and so I'm going to put my attention on Twitter because I prefer to be able to see who's on Twitter, at least for now. Alright, well, I'll just start anyway. I think anyone, I should have set it up so anyone can ask to speak. So hopefully you can at any point just ask to speak and I'll unmute you. Alright, well, welcome to X Spaces, YouTube, etc. The reason I'm doing this on YouTube, for those who didn't notice, is that I went viral, quote unquote, on YouTube. I just noticed that I had. Audio's a little choppy. So I'm not surprised on YouTube. I think it's to do with the streaming, the staggering, and the bandwidth. That's the word I was looking for. I did link to my Twitter, so if those want to hear me, if the audio is bad on YouTube, you might have better luck on X, Twitter. Anyway, I'm sure it's plenty complicated at your end, yours ends, but it's considerably more at my end. So yeah, so this video that I put up 3 years ago, Rudolf Steiner talking about vaccines that would be designed by the Dark Brotherhood in order to shut down people's spiritual senses. I put that up, a reading from another site, and just in the context of the mRNA, but without referring to it. So somebody commented that it was strange that it hadn't been taken down, which I suppose is true, particularly as it's now gone viral by my standards, like 70,000 views and 800 comments. And so I was scrolling through those comments, and I noticed they're all from 2 weeks ago. And well, I don't know about all, because I didn't get through all of them, but it looked like that. So I'm still trying to find out what happened. My wife told me something she heard from Cory Doctorow, which is to do with how these internet platforms, if they see that you're drifting away from them, they have a strategy that they sometimes use, which is they boost one of your content, your videos in this case, in such a way that you think, well, actually that platform's working suddenly, so maybe I'll go back to it. If so, I've fallen through it, because that's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly why I'm including YouTube in my X chat. I'm just gonna, well, actually I don't need to do a message. So if anyone is in the called Dis Redux on X, can you just send a message as far that you heard this and just let me know how the sound is and stuff, because I don't like being in this amount of uncertainty about whether I'm coming through. Anyway, so the other thing that is motivating me is I noticed that a large number of the commentators at YouTube, and my wife said, well, they could be bots. So I responded to a couple of them, and I got responses from those two. Good, thanks. And so I confirmed that they weren't bots, or at least if they're bots, they're advanced bots. You know, they can actually make decisions and answer, have dialogue, pass the Turing test. Um, and anyway, yeah. So there seems to be an awful lot of Christians, I presume, because in the demographic of people who are really seriously distrusting the mRNA vaccine, there's a large percentage of Christians. And seeing as my focus is so much on Christianity nowadays, I thought, well, seize the day, make hay while the sun shines. So now's the time to ask it at YouTube. Audio is fine, good. What's this stream about? Somebody asked. What's in the title? Read the show notes. I can't promise I will get to it, but there's three subjects. One is the New World Order socialist or not? The other is, how can you spot a shill when you're standing on your toe in an elevator? And the third is, are there any real Christians since Christ? Have there been? And that was the topic I was just addressing now. So I just want to ask, on YouTube was 19 people. Are there any Christians? First of all, if you're a Christian, just say so in the chat, or you know, or you can qualify if you want, because I wouldn't say yes, I'm a Christian if somebody asked me, but I'd say something. I wouldn't just say no either. Which is kind of one of the things I want to talk about, I suppose, what it means to be a Christian. Anyway, so that was just a bit of background info. I just thought, well, let's see who all these new people on YouTube are who are commenting and I think subscribing, because my subscription number's gone up a lot. And if they're Christians, well, you know, maybe I can try out some of my understandings, my interpretations on them, but perhaps they won't be. Perhaps they won't show up. Because after all, it was just a video quoting Rudolf Steiner. So none of these new people came because of me. They just thought this was an interesting quote, basically. All right, well, so I'll just start talking about, I've already started talking about, I'll just start talking about the first subject that I put in the title or the description, which is the New World Order socialist? Now, this isn't a question that particularly interests me, so I'm hoping I don't have to spend too long on it. The reason it doesn't interest me is because, to me, you've seen one political ideology, you've seen them all, essentially. That it's not as though they're interchangeable, but you could say that the organized malevolence, as whatever that is, however you understand that, has many sock puppets. It's the finger puppets, and it's got 5 fingers on one hand and 5 fingers on the other hand, and so that's an awful lot of finger puppets. So to me, socialism, fascism, communism have run out already. See, that's how uninterested I am. They're just finger puppets on the hand of this this entity or this egregore. I have to kind of leave that open because otherwise I have to get into what I think is really moving these ideologies and using them. But I've been arguing with my wife about it because she's more on the Red Scare side of things, and so she's always talking about Soviet Russia and China and how it's happening here and stuff. And she does, to give credit, she does follow an awful lot what the agendas are and the latest changes in the rules and the mandates, not laws, please note, because we're moving into this rule-based society. And she listens to people who have experience or claim to have experience of Soviet Russia and China and so on. So generally, she's pretty competent as a researcher and even interpreting. But she also listens to people like James Lindsay, who maybe do overstate it, and she doesn't seem to care as much as I do. It seems clearly to be part of the controlled opposition does seem to be playing into this Red Scare, playing it up, dumbing it down, stripping it of nuance, and throwing out, I think, totally unhelpful things like Kamala Harris is a communist or this is communism. So it's not like I disagree with those who have been trying to point out that this isn't strictly accurate. But as I say, it doesn't really interest me a great deal. Now, I had this problem because to me it's totalitarianism by any other name. If I'm going to give it a political name, it's totalitarianism. It was totalitarianism in communist Russia, it's totalitarianism in China. I mean, aspiring to. Obviously, it hasn't become total. And it's totalitarian in the US and the UK and Spain and Europe and so on. The movement is towards totalitarianism, total control. And any ideology will do if it can be used, and it wouldn't exist as a political system if it couldn't be used, if it wasn't useful. So I just think they're mixing up all kinds of different methodologies and ideologies and policies and so on. So I don't think it's helpful to talk about communism or to name it communism, because that is an ideology. Totalitarianism isn't really an ideology, it's a methodology. And here we could get to, and it's accurate, I think, here we could get to Fabian socialism. Now, Vice of Kings, I regretted putting socialism in the title, particularly because it was a bit opportunistic, because I was aware of this controlled opposition of Jordan Peterson followers and those who came after Jordan Peterson talking about cultural Marxism, the creeping influence of socialism. And I thought, well, okay, so that will show up on search engines and maybe there'll be better book sales. And generally, I don't really let those kind of ideas influence me to the extent of a book title. At the same time, and to be fair to myself, I did ask for Fabianism, and they said that's too niche. So then I suggested socialism. I changed it to Fabianism on Amazon. And what I do know about is Fabianism, somewhat. And I know that Fabianism pretends to be socialism to some extent, is socialism, because socialism was partially created by Fabianism. So here's where you can go round and round, like, what is real socialism? I don't care. I care what real Christianity is, but even that is a bit of a slippery slope, because if you end up believing that there has been no such thing as real Christianity since Christ resurrected, let's say, and moved on, then what are we talking about also there? It's very difficult to say. There are institutions, and then there are individuals. And there may well be individuals who are practicing something very close to honest or true Christianity. I'm sure there are. And they may even belong to institutions. But there are not, in my very strong opinion, institutions that are practicing anything vaguely resembling true Christianity. And because of that, I would say there are no interpretive doctrines. Well, I don't mean none, but I mean ones that are authorized and canonized. I simply don't believe that those exist. But I've jumped over one subject now, getting to Christianity. But I do think that if we have an interest in understanding Christianity, both from a socio-cultural point of view, because it's obviously a very significant phenomena in the West, and from a spiritual point of view, then the gospel, if all we refer to is the gospel or the whole New Testament or the whole Bible, depending how focused we want to be, then some sort of interpretation might be necessary. I personally have kept it to the very minimum, and René Girard is currently my only go-to for interpretation, but I have other books. But currently my focus is on René Girard, and I feel he has helped me in a way to understand what being a Christian is, or what Christianity could be, let's say. So I'm not against interpretations, but whatever, commentaries, of course, just institutionalized kind. And so I do wonder, of course, when it comes to Christians, let me just check. Catholic, okay, here they are. Oh, there's Ross, somebody I know, Ross. Skeptic, I already answered him. Christian-ish, not churchian. So yeah, so that's Ross is more or less similar to how I might describe it if I didn't have time to go into nuance. Catholic here, but not a zealot. So it's two anyway, but I don't think those two came via, certainly Ross didn't come via Rudolf Steiner video. So I probably don't have to go into my spiel that was just in case there are a whole bunch of Christians, follower of Christ, who had no familiarity with my approach, because I could definitely alienate those Christians very, very quickly if I was too blunt. But as I said, I don't think they're there. So I think I'll go back to the second subject, which is about the shills. It's rather hot in here. I'm just wondering if they'll all tie together. If anybody wants to jump in, actually, because I don't want to. Like normally, if I would have a meeting, it would be face to face. Like I'm kind of new to this. I haven't done YouTube in a long time. YouTube, they are just talks because there's no possibility. There wasn't when I was doing of other people talking, and chat isn't the equivalent. So X is the first time I've done talks that people can actually jump in like a radio show. So I'm not used to that. Normally, I'm used to meetings where they're interactive, even if it's just I can see everybody, so I can respond that way. Even if nobody says anything, I can respond. I can tell to some degree how people are receiving what I'm saying. So I'm used to, and I prefer interactive meets. But clearly, most people who come across my work are not ready, not interested, not willing to attend those meetings. The point is that I don't have a subject or a topic when I do those meetings. I just wait to see, like Quakers, to see what comes into the space. But I feel I can't do that. I don't want to do that on Twitter. So I give a subject so people have a sense that potentially they can just be a passive audience member and they know what they're going to get. But I do prefer not to do that, to be restricted. But since I have done that, if anybody wants to jump in on is socialism, is the New World a socialist or not, because I've just steamed through that in a very cursory way. I think I would go to the shill question because that interests me more. So if anyone wants to stay on the question of socialism, communism, totalitarianism, speak now or forever hold your peace, because I will move on. I'm going to take a breath and just drink some water. Somebody said Christ didn't want followers. Well, what did he want then, seeing as you have a sense of what Christ didn't want? Maybe you have a sense of what he did want. You put it in the chat also. Okay, let me just check. There's 11 people in the space. I didn't get any requests to speak, so again, use your twat, use your chat, not your twat. If there's anything you need to communicate, and if you're not in the group, just tweet at me, because I can keep checking that feed as well. All right, so the shill question. That I felt that well, first of all, I was planning to talk about Peter Levene and stuff because I thought it'd be good to have some follow through, some through line from what I posted at the Substack on Wednesday to what I talk about on X on Sunday. I mean, even if it isn't a regular thing, it has been for 3 weeks now. So in the meantime, have some continuity there, which is tricky for me because generally once I've written it, a couple of days go by and then I sort of moved on. And in this case, it was an old piece anyway. But things came up for me today around the IM 1776 site, and people have commented on that already to me in response to my questions. And the thing about that is that I know personally Daniel Miller, he's one of the editors there, and I did submit something for them, and it never got published, and it got accepted, but then it never got published, which is kind of weird, and it just got dropped without my being told. And at the time that that was going on, maybe I should give full background. I'm not sure if I need to now. I'll just skip the unnecessary parts. I became aware that the IM 1776 was plugging Elon Musk. And obviously that got my attention. I thought that was weird, because my impression was it was a fairly rigorous. I read Schwab's article, and then later Thomas Miller wrote for it, but this was before he had from Psyop Cinema. Schwab seemed like a pretty hard-hitting paranoid. We had a falling out, but I won't get into that. So yeah, it seemed a bit surprising. And then when I looked into it today, I saw that they're still plugging, or they're again plugging Elon Musk hard, and Trump too, and just generally everything that entails, essentially. Which I don't know how to sum it up briefly without making it too simple and just saying, well, the controlled opposition, which is obviously totally lacking in any moving parts whatsoever, is just a dismissal for those who already think that's what it is. So to come up with a summation that is much more nuanced and with more variables for people who are on the fence, at least. Just checking the comments on YouTube. I haven't pre-prepared that. I don't have it backstage, so I can just roll it out. But I talked about it with Luke on the Dodcast a little bit. He brought up how formerly paranoid researchers of long-term social engineering agendas that have come to understand, without just going all the way to the overly simplistic thing, everything is being controlled and everything is being co-opted, and right, they've got if anything happens, it's because it's planned. Without going all the way to there, generally have a pretty well-informed sense that these plans and these agendas are highly sophisticated, and they do cover many, if not most, of the bases. And so when it comes to looking for genuine alternatives, you have to look hard. You clearly cannot trust the algorithms or the figures, the stats, which are related, obviously, because people have more followers if the algorithms behind them, and vice versa. They have the algorithms more behind them if they have more followers. Now, this may be systemic to a large degree, and the whole conspiracy, in quotes, may be systemic, but it's also engineered intentionally. Like there's two things going on at the same time, and you could put the two together by saying that central to the central goals of the long-term global engineering planners is to make the agendas systemic, to make them run themselves. And I think that that's very much what has happened. I have to always stop when I'm going to use the word they, because people think they know what that means. So we have an idea that there is a they, whether it's the WEF or the CFR or the Illuminati, or even, I go to Aramanic, non-physical beings, but is they the right term for them? Maybe if they're transgender, it is. Anyway, I'm getting on a roll now, which means I'm going to start losing the thread a lot, because I just lost the thread. Systemic conspiracies. that run themselves. Yeah, so we are seeing an increasing kind of incompetence in the administrative levels, because this is the level at which this globalist plan, let's say, I gave it an ism name, this totalitarian agenda is self-maintaining. And so lower level operatives or even useless idiots can maintain it, which is what woke is demonstrating. You actually get just ordinary people, your friends, your family, and your neighbors are maintaining the hegemony of these ideologies and this agenda, uh, innocently, in quotes, ignorantly. But then levels up from that, you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have education people or teachers and so on, who are pushing the agendas just because they think that they're right, that they're kind, that they're compassionate, that they're on the right side of history, right? So all of that, you could say that there's no conspiring going on. Well, there might be some, but there's no high level sort of planning for the next 50 years conspiring, um, because they're not in the loop. And they are incompetent because they've been propagandized by the ideological viri. Well, that's a risky term, actually, because I think they're using that idea of mind viruses to control the internet. See, this is an example, a living example. Like, even the language and the terms we use, they're being shaped and seeded in the culture. So anyway, the point I was getting to is that it's extremely subtle in terms of, keep it to the subject, controlled opposition and shills and operatives. Um, they may be our own family members, they may be ourselves some of the time, they may be the words we use. So the idea that there might be a major figure on the world stage who is somehow on the other side fighting against it is frankly, it's demented. It's so far from the reality that I'm at a loss for words when I see this. Fortunately, somebody has informed me, or more than one person has informed me, that IM 1776 is a Peter Thiel backed operation. I don't know how true this is, but that's what I heard today. And Peter Thiel is interesting to me because he was René Girard's student, literally. I mean, I think he knew him personally. So at least in a student teacher capacity. And of course, he's, well, everybody knows who Peter Thiel is listening now, probably. He's on Joe Rogan. So he really is. He's being put forward now, even though he doesn't seem like he's a very good person for that. He might be from the same factory that Elon Musk actually came out, but he's not as an advanced a model, I think. Maybe that's based on very little. But why was I saying that? Oh, the IM 1776. So yes, from what I hear, that magazine is funded, and it is meant as a seemingly alternate venue for information and commentary that is affiliated with the elite. Was the point I made on their Twitter feed, was they were saying why this is why the elite hate Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And they would say, hello, Elon Musk is the elite, Donald Trump is the elite. By what weird criteria are we somehow imagining that the billionaires and former and future presidents are not of the elite? Anyway, I'm going to get started on that. Again, my rant mode. So yes, so that apparently that is a visible, as you can see the strings there. I don't know if I was rightly informed. It's not a secret that IM 76 isn't just pushing strange opinions for a venue that writes about MK Ultra and really heavy conspiracy stuff. It's actually in the fine print. Like that's the people who are behind it are part of this gang, if you will, but they're selling through these smaller venues, mouthpieces. They're selling the idea that there really is an opposition that is uncontrolled, an uncontrolled opposition that has arisen organically through the meritocracy of the internet now, but before the internet, or parallel with the internet, Silicon Valley, self-made billionaires, etc. Somehow that it's possible that Zuckerberg, Gates, Thiel, and Musk are truly self-made billionaires who did it without any help from, and Trump did it without any help from the system. They just knew how to play the system, right? So it's a sort of higher level of this idea of the meritocracy, and then that feeds into the idea of a genuine resistance. And as I say, my mind boggles that I have to even address this as something that is absurd or palpably untrue or unrealistic, but it does seem that it is taking root, and so that becomes a meaningful question. How is it that people, because we had this question with I had it, many did, with COVID, also with the CIA and Russiagate. Before that, suddenly people were trusting in institutions, organizations, and agencies that 6 months earlier they knew were part of an extremely corrupt, malevolent system, or you know, instruments of it. Big Pharma, CIA. Suddenly they were trusting in them. Why? Because they were told to, and they were scared. Basically, just to keep it really simple. And it's very, if you're scared that things are getting really bad really fast, you're more desperate than ever. I mean, the more afraid you are, the more desperate you are for some sort of hope, some sort of relief. The relief comes from, yes, this is a terrifying situation, but yes, there is hope. We're taking care of it. This is what we could segue into Christianity if we wanted, which I'd say is at least on the way to the genuine hope. The hope when all hope is gone. Abandon hope, or you enter into the second matrix. But once you've abandoned all hope, then something like true hope might emerge from that emptiness that we create in ourselves. We empty ourselves of all these culturally incepted false hopes. Anyway, I segued into Christianity there and got philosophical. Point is, people have hope, belief in the technocracy, that it's self-made, that it's genuinely offering a solution. Only, I suppose, as I say, because things have got so bad and they're looking so bad that people are willing to believe things that they wouldn't otherwise be willing to believe. So anyway, so controlled opposition shills, obviously these two things overlap. And so one of my concerns and my questions, and partly why I revisited the Peter Levenda material, I just have to check that I'm not missing out on any messages, right? Is that I've been on the Higher Side chats, and I knew that when I thought, if I'm going to do Greg Higher Side chats, I'm going to have to, one other listener, I'm going to have to call him out, because otherwise I can't go on a show that has all these shills on it and not say something, because then I'm just one among shills, if you know what I mean. I mean, I'm basically endorsing a show that is endorsing shills by doing the show. So in order to neutralize that, I didn't think it through. I just thought, I'm going to have to be honest. I'm going to want to be honest with Greg. But thinking it through now, in order to neutralize that, if this was compromising of my own integrity, then I had to speak up. And since that time then, and there was pushback, even though there was very little pushback directly about that, it was sideways, passive aggressive. But anyway, there was pushback. You know, I was a bit disturbed for a couple of days after I was reading those comments. I called the biggest turd ever that Greg had on his show. Things like that. I mean, they can get under your skin. If you're soft skinned, and I am soft skinned, you know, I've become more soft skinned as I've matured. You think you're supposed to get more thick skin. In some ways I have, but in terms of, I'm much less reactive, but I'm more sensitive. See, because you can be sensitive and not react, and you can be reactive and you're not really sensitive. So it's important not to desensitize, and I haven't. Anyway, um, uh, so since then, it's sort of been it's sort of stayed around this idea. Well, all of these shills, they're all out there just working day and night to trick us and deceive us. And although I know I'm not one of them, if I'm really thorough, I have to see that I could be playing into the operations. I could be shilling without being a shill. Right? We can end up passing on the disinformation just because we're not discerning enough, number one, and number two, because we're not honest enough. Or fearless is quite the right word. So I've been trying to find the balance. I mean, this isn't exactly on topic because I'm saying how do you tell a shill, but hopefully I'll get to it. I've been trying to find the balance between a sort of reactive oppositional identity that, if I'm honest, actually kind of gets off on, gets a kick out of challenging people on their bullshit, which I don't think is particularly healthy. I mean, it's real people, and they've got their reasons and so on. It's not just like it's a video game. I can just blow off Peter Leventer's head. The other thing, didn't think I was going to say this, but I haven't tweeted at Peter Leventer this time. I haven't let him know that I'm digging up, flogging this dead horse again for people who didn't see it the first time around. Dug it up, flog it some more. Because the last time, which is 2016, right before Trump was elected, coincidence? I don't know. Some really bad juju came my way, and I did think, oh, don't mess with these sorcerers. I mean, they don't mess around. Like they're not. Playing games. This isn't kids stuff. Anyway, so in tweet time, forgot what I was saying, but I did sort of poke around a bit. So Pasulka's, looked at Pasulka's timeline, and then the IM 7076, and it's just kind of become more. It's more on my mind right now, right? This seems a worthwhile. I suppose one element I'll say is that, and this is, I'm sort of going out on a limb that I'm talking about having to be careful to go out on, but I've already did it with 1776 because I know those people. But so because I don't know, somebody else I could mention, see, I don't want to mention, but I'm just getting closer and closer to individuals who I suspect of shilling, like being published by the same periodical, let's say. And so then working with people who trust these characters who I think they shouldn't trust, and keeping it sufficiently vague, but also sufficiently obvious for anyone who is paying attention to know what I'm talking about specifically. But it doesn't matter if you don't, except it's always good to, devil is in the details and stuff. It becomes extremely delicate then. And it's very easy to self-sabotage and sabotage others. Like even tweeting about IM 76 or at them. Well, Thomas Murray writes for them. He's associated with me. That could, they could get put off him just because he associates with me if I become too annoying to them and so on, etc. So I guess this is what this is what being socialized is like. So I've managed to avoid being socialized for most of my life. One good thing about getting money early on, because that's the time that they really get you. Where you think like, I better go along just to get along. I didn't have to do that in those key years of teenage to young adult, because I knew I was having money. I would have money, and then I did have money, and then I got rid of the money, and that was also a way to avoid socialization. Right? It's both. Right? If you got no money, but you think you need money, then you'll go along and stuff. But also, if you've got money, you'll find yourself going along in other ways as well. So I went from a inherent fun kid, whatever they call those people, trust fund baby, to homeless street person, but more or less in the right sort of timeline, I'd say, because I was 24 by the time I was on the street. So I was competent. I didn't get killed. I didn't get too diseased or anything like that. That was a digression, but yeah, being socialized. So I guess this is very pertinent to the largest topic, which I've touched on, which is although controlled opposition can include you or me and anyone, the major platforms are always useful to controlled ops, I would say, at least after a while. Like Jordan Peterson was probably genuine and genuinely offering something real for a while, and then whatever happened, and so on. So that has to do with the more you have to lose, the more you will toe the line, and that's socialization as well. The more friends you have, the more social connections, relations you have, the more careful you may start to feel you have to be. And then the easier it is to surround you by shills, to guide you, to nudge you this way and that. So it is understandable and somewhat healthy or necessary, but particularly easy if you're autistic already, which can mean different things to different people, to eschew social lives, to just, I don't have to avoid them. I just don't try and establish them, right? And if you're honest to a fault, you'll find that you won't develop much of a social life anyway. So I'm just going to catch up at YouTube. So again, on X, if anybody wants to jump in, just think of it as a radio show, just calling up and giving your opinion. Well, maybe not opinion, but your insights. At least Musk plays the part well. Good summary. It's ludicrous. Somebody agreeing with me, I think. Truthers are easy to fool because they want someone to save them. Yes. Which of course segues into Christianity if we wanted to. False idols. Jesus was against them too, but they inverted his message. Yes, I would agree with that, roughly. Yaden is a shill. Well, okay, so somebody's saying, maybe somebody's a shill. P.T. Barnum, Carnival Barker, Alex Jones. Apparently, Anton LaVey was big on P.T. Barnum. I have a book about him. Barnum. So I just linger on this one because it'll bring me back to the main topic, how to tell a shill. So whether somebody is a shill or not, it's only the right question is if we know what we mean by it, or it depends what one means by it, because there are definitely different kinds of shills anyway. Let's just put it that way. So a literal shill. Well, okay, let's use an easy example. The difference between David Icke and Alex Jones, possibly. My personal subjective impression is that Alex Jones is a shill and David Icke is not. But David Icke, well, he's not as useful as Alex Jones because you can see Alex Jones gets Donald Trump on his show. Like he obviously, I don't think has Joe Rogan talked to David Icke. See, because you can see like this is one point I wanted to make about Peter Levender is you can see that Peter Levender's associates back when I was looking into it. I can't say now, but it's kind of the usual suspects list. So he was on the Strieber thing a lot. He was very praising, glowing of Jeffrey Kripal's book. Obviously the Tom DeLonge but that's moving it really closer to real obvious intel, like John Podesta. Pasulka, Eric Davis. I mean, it's not super obvious because sometimes it's just Davis has Pasulka on his Expanding Mind podcast, and he doesn't ask her any difficult questions. It's different from Greg doing that, by the way, because Greg isn't a disseminator of meme of philosophies, or whatever we can call Eric Davis. He's a disseminator. Greg's just a host. He's just a talk show host, right? So it's, although I don't think it's pardonable, it's definitely a lot less damning. I don't think of Greg Carlson as a shill just because he didn't challenge Pasulka. He's just not informed enough, and he doesn't consider it his job. But Eric Davis, to have her on his podcast and not ask her the difficult questions, then he's complicit with what she's doing, right? So then you can see there's a kind of alliance there, but it's difficult to say. Is it a conscious alliance? Jeffrey Kripal, Strieber, that's obviously a conscious alliance. They endorse each other's work. Jack Valley, throw him in there. But you can see the shared narrative. They're working together on a narrative, a single narrative essentially, but they're adding different elements. I mean, Eric Davis is a bit more psychedelic, right? So it branches out. You've got the UFO, you've got psychedelics, and so on. Well, those two particularly are very complementary, and occultism would be a third one. And how that works, I mean, I'm jumping around a bit now because I know I was trying to get to a different point. Hopefully I remember it, but I just remember another point in all this is it's very much about narratives. And I'll just check my notifications. And hegemonic narratives was a term I heard today, right? So you have hegemonies, or I know I pronounced that word wrong, but anyway, hegemony is how you're supposed to pronounce that, I think. You've got these hegemonies, doesn't sound right to me, but and they are maintained by narratives, and they also, whatever the hegemony is, it also it either creates or it employs the narratives, right? So obviously, if you have a narrative that supports the hegemony, then the hegemony supports the narrative, and the narrative spreads further and faster. When you look at individuals, so this is my answer to how do you tell a show. If you look at an individual like Davis or Pasulka or Kripal or Schreiber or Jack Valley or I Am 1776, some of that stuff, you can see that there's a back scratching going on. There's a mutual benefit that these individuals are supporting a narrative, and the narrative then supports them. This is a very simple point, but I just feel it's a good one. And I don't know if I can unpack it or it needs unpacking, but it's a good point, I think, because it's self-evident. It kind of sounds like, why do you even have to say that? It's so obvious, but it's very descriptive. They support the narrative supports them. So it means that they're essentially beholden to the narrative. They become spreaders of the narrative. And the more they can spread that narrative, the stronger the narrative gets, the more the narrative raises them up so they can spread it. So it's not circular, but cumulative, it snowballs. And I was going to say, okay, so this overlaps with socialization, the first point. Because if you're part of creating and building a narrative and you're associating with others who are building it, and you're part of institutions at MIT, Rice University, etc., that are behind these narratives or congruent with them, or part of spreading them, then it's very palpable as well socially. It's not that abstract. Like if you say something that questions the narrative, then obviously you're less aligned with the narrative, and so your position gets shakier just in terms of even you don't quite know what to say. Right? You're supposed to be sticking to the narrative, but then you're asking questions. Wait a minute, and then the narrative might start falling apart. That's just a very basic general point. But socially speaking, that if you start questioning or coming up with counter arguments, then very quickly the other people that you surround yourself by, whether they're above you or not, they're going to notice and they're going to react in a certain way, and you're going to start feeling uncomfortable. And this is very, I mean, it's very closely related to how shills stay uncovered, because social anxiety and fear of embarrassment uh, is a very powerful force. Like, it's not like we're afraid we're actually going to get murdered. It doesn't even have to get to the point we might get cancelled, but just actually having that awkward tension of calling out the gorilla in the room. That's the first hurdle, and most people don't get over that hurdle. Anyway, so I sort of keep moving away from how to tell a shill, and I didn't finish my Alex Jones versus David Icke point. So I'm not going to claim that I can tell who's sincere and who isn't. So that's why I say it's entirely subjective. But my impression of Alex Jones is he doesn't really even try that hard to seem sincere. He's obviously performing. Russell Brand, another example. Don't think Russell Brand is sincere. I mean, he's just not sincere as a person, as a human being. So I don't see how you could expect, or why you would imagine that he's going to be sincere as a disseminator of information. I guess it's a double bluff like Jimmy Savile. You just think, well, he's buffooning around, so he must be serious, right? Or he must be genuine. I don't know quite how that works, but like you're putting it forward. So like if he was really trying to trick us, he'd be more respectable and more serious, you know. But anyway, Russell Brand's similar, obviously performing, obviously not really being themselves, and I would guess that would be how somebody like this would square it in their own conscience, assuming they still have one. That if anyone's dumb enough not to see through this, well, it's their lookout. I mean, I really do think that that's a trickle down mentality of social engineers. I know because I have it actually a little bit, and I sympathize with that point of view. If people are dumb enough to take that mRNA, well, it's their lookout. I mean, I actually do feel that way. I just think it's not very compassionate or good of me to feel that way, because of course there's all these extenuating circumstances. But I'm just being honest now. I stop there because I doubt it is that really honest, but I'm trying to be honest. Anyway, David Icke, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be performing a lot of the time. He really does seem to be quite sincere and earnest, or trying to be. And I just think he's misguided. I think he's really misguided, and I think he's co-opted. I think he's being played or being manipulated. So I don't think that David Icke is any less useful necessarily, although again his reach is lesser. But anyway, so that's an example of a difference. And so how do I gauge? You see, some people, maybe not people listening, but they think Alex Jones is for real, and I don't think I need to address that, because I mean, I feel like I should, because there's people I respect who think that. But okay, so just really simply, how come he has such a big platform? How come even though he gets cancelled, there's a big song and dance about $1 million lawsuits, he comes back fighting? Look at Julian Assange, and I don't even think Julian Assange is exactly clean. He was obviously being promoted, but it does seem like he pissed somebody off. And but anyway, I mean, even if it was fake, still that's what appears to happen. And I mean, I'm getting all tangled up, but if you want to think that Julian Assange is fake, still, and he wasn't really locked up all that time and so on, maybe you can think that that's okay, but still, that's what it would look like. That's what they make it look like, because that's what it would be like if it was real. If it is real, that's what it's like. If they don't kill you, they totally fuck your life up, right? And then totally deplatform you. You didn't even have internet access, right? So just contrast that. Never mind Gary Webb or these people who just get snuffed out, Danny Carlos, so they just get snuffed out. So I mean that's number one. I just feel like I'm shooting fish in the barrel here. Number two is a more nuanced take. Like, look at the way in which the information is being conveyed. Look at the context that's created with the buffoonery and the exaggeration, and at some point this overlaps with David Icke, with the oversimplification, with the pumping up of emotion. Like, I'm not saying that people can't go from Alex Jones or David Icke to the next stop in the right direction and end up here, say, or with somebody that I can't name because I don't follow anyone and you wouldn't have heard of them if I did, but I'm just trying to think if there's anyone. David McGowan's dead. He got quite big anyway after he died, or just before he did. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter, but in the right place anyway, where there's a nuanced discussion going on and you can ground it in reality and start to test it. It is possible, but you can't have a lighthouse that's meant to have people crashing on the rocks without guiding some ships away from the rocks. If they're discerning enough and they're aware enough, wait a minute, this could be a lighthouse that's going to trick me, they can still use the same light to steer away from the rocks. Let's say, I don't think that's a very perfect metaphor, but it's just going to have to do. There's definitely a better one if I could think of it. And without any metaphors, you have, if you're going to create a disinformation limited hangout second matrix space, then you have to put a lot of good stuff in there, of course, because you want to get as many flies in your honeypot as you can. So if you're deft enough and discerning enough, sure, you could go and get good stuff from Alex Jones. I'm not denying that, but you've got to take the whole enterprise, the whole project, the whole context, and the consequences, the result. And the result we're talking about here, well, it's two sides. One is the big picture that Alex Jones is clearly part of a much larger psychological operation, controlled psychological opposition operation, which is this fight the power, join the resistance, Donald Trump, Elon Musk. I don't know how Elon Musk and what's his name, Alex Jones get on, but certainly Joe Rogan and Musk seem pretty tight. That's one way it's serving strange. The other way is this internal compromising of the cognitive faculties. I don't personally believe that you could spend too much time imbibing Alex Jones without having your cognitive faculties damaged, to be honest. Because, and I say this is not the only reason, but one reason, the kind of intensely distressing and disturbing material is not supposed to be shoved down your throat with a megaphone, right? It has to be administered really carefully, like homeopathy, and you observe the changes in your nervous system, you check, and you check the information with your own experience, you do your research. It's a very long and slow, hard process. You see, I went from being a conspiracy theorist in my 20s and early 30s, or even my 30s, really, where I was just passing on. I was just regurgitating nothing, Alex Jones, but probably some of the same material, right? From Graham Hancock or Willie Strieber or what's his name, Bill Cooper, all these guys. I'm not saying they're all shills. And I didn't know, some people still like that stuff, Lucid View, but I honestly didn't know what I was doing, and I couldn't ground any of that in experience. I couldn't apply it. So I went from that, the conspiracy theorist, in a sort of most profane sense, to, well, what I've been doing in my 40s and my 50s, which is something else, whatever that is. I'm not going to try and define it. And so and that process took a long time. It was easy to just read the books and regurgitate it. It would be easy to do relatively easy. Well, I mean, I'm not, because some of these guys, they don't just read books. Like Alex Jones writes, I mean, David Icke writes a book a year, but where does he get all that stuff? I don't know. Anyway, he's probably got a whole team, but there definitely is a feeling of regurgitating. It's not, you don't feel as one man on a personal journey as far as the information. You might be on a personal journey as far as being this celebrity disseminator of conspiracies, of course, but the personal journey is like what I read recently about philosophy. I think it was Wittgenstein. If the philosophy isn't about discovering a better way to live, what the hell is it? Exactly the same goes for conspiracy research. If it's not about learning how to live better, then what the hell are we doing? What is the point of it? And so that's so different from just gathering information and arranging it and saying, look, you know, homosexual frogs, they're trying to kill us. She eats babies, whatever else. Right. Anyway, as I said, that was very low hanging fruit for how to tell a shill. So, and David Icke, I think, is pretty low hanging. So, well, again, that's why I shared the Lavender piece, because that was how I, over a period of time, just checking the comments. Never been on Rogan. David Icke, getting a bit thirsty. I don't know, I hope I'm not coming off as hyper. I seem to be talking a lot. I think it would take a lot for me to come across as hyper for American viewers, because essentially, no matter how hyper I think I get, they still think I've just dropped some morphine or whatever the current equivalent is. What was I saying? Forgotten now. I'll just take some water. Can somebody who can type in the cognitive disc, that'd be Stephen DeLay or Leafbox or Parenti, just confirm that you do have the option to unmute, because I'd hate to think that I've basically just muzzled everybody. Or if anybody's trying to unmute and I didn't see the message. I'm supposed to get a message. Because at least, oh, okay, somebody did. Okay, a lot to say about Musk. Okay, well, let me look then. This is why we're not seeing it. Let me see if I can just, no, that's not working. Because I used to have an invite to speak even. Listen. I wonder if I didn't check the setting before I started. But Parenti is saying you did have an option to request the mic. So did it seem to work at your end? Yeah, I do have to do something. I have to accept it, but I can't see any request. It's Elon, you see, he doesn't want us to talk about him. He wants to control the narrative. Yeah, because it was very easy last week. If I can just make it bigger. So I get rid of that. Yeah, that made it bigger. It's very, because Spaces is just so basic. Space settings, let's see. Speakers, who can speak? Only people you invite to speak. Everyone, okay, I did get it wrong, but I've changed it. Okay, so try again now. Requested. Ta-da! There we go. All right, you are now live. Or maybe not. Okay, you should be able to speak. If I wasn't on YouTube, I'd take my shirt off. It's extremely hot. I'm not aware of the person claiming to be Madeleine McCann. I wonder if Roberta Glass knows about this, because I plan to speak to her. Parenti sound system, are you having trouble? Oh, maybe it's at my end. I better check that my speakers are working. Maybe everyone else can hear you and I can't. Bloody typical. I'll just check that I have sound. You will hear it at your end. Yeah, I have sound. So, but I can't hear Parenti sound system, ironically. Your sound system is not working. It still just says request sent. Yeah, but I accepted it. I'm going to invite you. We'll try it that way. Send invite. If anyone else wants to try in the meantime, we can find out if the problem is at Parenti's end or not. Right, well, while we're waiting for that, does anyone at YouTube want to remind me where I was at? Oh, it was something to do with, oh, it was to do with the less obvious shills. But it clicked. I just got a respond, but it clicked and it's not working. Can someone else try on X? You don't have to say anything. I mean, you can just remind me what I was doing now. So. Because Parenti Sound System has already announced he wants to talk about Musk, so we need a control now. Right? Is that the problem, or is it a general problem? So Leafbox, if you're listening, can you just request to speak? Well, I guess I can just invite. I've forgotten how I did it now. Bloody hell, here we go. Invite. I'm going to invite Leafbox and see what happens. I'm letting everyone on YouTube see my email. That's not good. That's a really bad idea. All right, there we go. Aha! Who's that?
Hey Jason, can you hear me or not?
Yeah.
Beatbox Robert.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Well, thanks. I see you've got lots of background sounds, so it probably isn't the best idea unless you really do have something to say.
No, I was just testing the mic for you.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks. Thanks so much. Okay, so it's not at this end, Parenti. So if you message, I don't want to talk about Elon Musk, I swear on my mother. Maybe, I'm just kidding, but it's not meant to be, I guess, not right this second anyway, but keep trying. Okay, somebody else has asked. I'm not sure if they were just being helpful, but just in case Mountain Elf wants to speak. I'm just going to go back to this.
Mine's working.
Yes, it is. Did you want to say anything, or you just wanted to confirm?
I'm late to the party, so probably better just confirm.
Do you remember what I was talking about before all this interruptions and technical stuff? Remember the last thing I was saying?
I just joined about 10 minutes ago. I had a bunch of crap going on over here, so I missed a bunch of it.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds compelling from what I saw in the chat.
Right. All right. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what I was saying, really. I still haven't got to this. How do you tell this shill when you're standing on your foot in the elevator? Which I don't know where that came from, by the way. I don't know if there's any hidden meaning in it or symbolic, or if it's just a throwaway line. I guess it has to do with embarrassment. Like if someone's standing on your foot in an elevator, do you say something? You see, for English, you say sorry. And then that conveys, they're like, oh, sorry. They realize that they've done something. But you don't say, excuse me, you're standing on my foot. Not even that. You certainly don't say, get the fuck off my foot, you fat bastard. It was Alex Jones. But you don't even say, excuse me, you're standing on my foot, because that's too confrontational. I shouldn't say you, but I said if you were English. So yeah, this is a sort of the embarrassment, the awkwardness of actually calling someone out. So I guess I didn't finish with a piece of Lavender. There's somebody that I knew, somebody that I'd spoken to for several hours for the stormy weather in 2008, and then I spoke to him for 3 hours or more in 2015, I think it was, for the Limerence. And I tell you that I was absolutely drained. I felt like my energy had all been sucked out of me after that conversation for the Limerence. And I was trying to end it, and he just kept it going. I mean, it's not exactly true, but certainly I wanted to end it quite a while before it did end. And it was very difficult somehow for me to end it, I guess, because I was trying to get it back on a roll before I ended it. And I did. I felt really physically drained after it. My head felt like my eyeballs were sort of shrunken, and my head was all sort of like a shriveled grape. And I just thought I just put that down to Lavender is very much in his head, and so I matched that, and I just really got into my head too much, and my life force wasn't moving through my body enough, and so all these symptoms started to manifest. And that may well be true, but that's not incompatible with him being a shill. Because if somebody's a shill, they have to be very careful what they say. They're constantly making sure that they don't give anything away they don't want to give away, and that they're constantly steering the conversation and handling you, the target. I mean, the target would have been the whole audience, because he was only speaking to me because he does. I think back then at least he did only podcast he was invited on. So yeah, that's part of the same thing, I think. Not that anyone who's in their head is shilling, but anyone who's shilling is likely to be very head-centered, head-centric. And I definitely, by the time I was talking to Peter Lavender, I had started to suspect, which is why I led with, have you ever been accused of being an operative? Because that was my English, you could say, or could say it was a sort of jiu-jitsu move, if you want to be more charitable. But my way of challenging him, it's not like they say, if you ask a cop, are you a cop? They have to say yes, otherwise whatever they testify about you in court later doesn't stick because they lied. So technically, if I'd said, are you now, or have you ever been an operative, that would have been more practical, I think. It certainly would have been more direct, but I didn't want to do that for the reasons I just talked about. I just wanted to say, have you ever stood on anyone's foot in an elevator and they didn't say anything? And he's like, oh, no. Oh yeah, but I always move my foot. I don't actually quite know how to extend that metaphor, because he didn't deny it, but he didn't affirm it. He just said, oh, well, that's a projection. And I didn't make anything of that, really. So, okay, well, he's not going to confirm it. My main suspicion was he was such an advocate of Whitley Strieber, and by that point, I knew with Whitley Strieber that he was severely compromised. So, and then, as I put in my piece, well, the first time I had a hint of it was an exchange with Lavender about alien abduction, and I was taking a psychoanalytical approach, as those who've read Prism of Infinity will know. I mean, a deep psychological approach, but in terms of dissociation, fragmentation of the psyche, alters, and how that can lead to entering into these psychic dimensions whereby all kinds of things might happen to us in some real sense, but they're not physically real. And then we come away believing in things that aren't as literally real as we think. Well, at least Strieber, basically, after I started hypothesizing this about him, I don't know if it was a response or not, he came up with this thing that he had been tested with his memories, that they have a test they can tell is if this actually physically happened to you or if your brain just thinks it did, because the brain will do that and it might even create symptoms and stuff, but it didn't. They've got some test that can tell the difference, something like that. So he said, I've been tested, so I know it actually physically happened. Anyway, but what the vendor did was he got quite defensive in a way, or offensive, or he just pushed back a lot about my approach by saying that if you were to try and tell victims of kidnapping that it was a psychological complex, that would be extremely demeaning and inconsiderate, which I thought was an odd approach. Obviously, there was more to it. Anyway, he was clearly defending the alien abduction narrative, which surprised me because he's not an actual advocate of it, or he wasn't back then, probably is now. But he was an ally with Strieber, and the thing is, I wasn't saying that per se, and I wasn't doing that kidnapping. So he was making aliens equivalent to human beings, as if there wasn't at least some room where you need more extraordinary evidence for an alien abduction than you do for a human abduction, because, right? I mean, it's obvious, it goes without saying. And I was never going to claim that Whitley Strieber wasn't physically manhandled and things didn't happen to him, because it seemed clear to me that they did. The question of whether they were aliens or not is something that certainly could, or non-human, could be hallucinated or rendered as a hallucination. Anyway, so that was my first experience with Lavender, and then it was the Crowley debate. And so I guess I don't want to just go all over this point by point, because you can just read the piece, or at least the half of it that's free. I do have to plug Children of Job at some point. If anyone at YouTube is listening to this and you're not subscribed to Children of Job, please do so now. Well, not please, but you want to do so, because that's where the real stuff's happening as far as my output. YouTube is a very rare thing. But anyway, it's nice to see some names and not faces, but names and avatars that I don't otherwise see. At least one anyway. Can't be sure about the others, because it's been so long since YouTube. And you might be Children of Job anyway, and I just don't recognize you because you're in disguise. But anyway, if anyone was here for the Christian thing, let me know, because as I said, that was a last minute thing, and I might not get to it. I'm not going to go point by point through the Lavender thing to read the piece, but it's an example of first of all, like if you want to know who is a shill and who isn't, you have to, it depends how badly you want to know. Because if you want to find out, then you have to do it yourself, essentially. I mean, obviously you can do some searches and you can ask around, and you'll get people's opinion. Oh, this person's a shill, this person's a shill. It's very easy. There's a rule at rigorous intuition: you can't ever accuse anyone of being a shill, and I think that's reasonable. Maybe that's partly why I didn't. I mean, I wasn't going to accuse him. You could ask somebody if there's a shill, but you just figure, what's the point, right? Professional liars, what's the point in asking them to tell the truth? And if then, because you don't know, you see, if they're not a shill, they'll say no, I'm not. And if they are a shill, they'll say no, I'm not. So you don't find anything out by asking that question, really, unless you just want to read the body language, which of course fair enough, but not so easy if you're just talking on Skype, as I was with Lavender. So you have to want to know, and then you have to do more than just ask around. And what I did with Lavender is I looked for inconsistencies, and I asked questions, and I we had a discussion, and I analyzed his responses, and I looked for the inconsistencies and for the we call this sort of the key elements in his arguments. What are the key components of his argument that without that the whole thing collapses? And there weren't very many. And what are they based on? And in case of Lavender, they weren't really evidence-based, which I guess is fair enough, because you say, well, you can't find evidence that somebody didn't do something. But he didn't ask me questions, was one clue. He didn't say, what's your evidence, or what? He just kept coming back with arguments, and then, as I say, his arguments didn't really hold up, and they weren't consistent. So at a certain point, or not that the arguments weren't consistent, but they weren't consistent with other things he had said elsewhere. Let's put it that way. Just try and keep it simple, because it's hard to keep all this in mind. So at a certain point, I began to feel more and more that Lavender wasn't being honest with me, that he was maintaining a position that he himself didn't actually believe in. And it's actually not that difficult to tell when somebody is being ingenuine. It's just that, and now we're coming back, getting really hot now. We're coming back to this thing of what's a shill, because if somebody is platforming and they're just trying to sell a narrative that they think will make them rich and famous, then they also might be like this. They might end up acting like a shill because they don't really want to question their own narrative too much. So with Lavender, it wasn't clear until a certain point that he was misrepresenting in a certain way. He was being dishonest with me to a degree. And then the final stage was to test the claims, to look for evidence that what he was claiming was untrue, not as in claiming about something else, but claiming about himself. So, and then what I discovered, for those who haven't gone through the paywall or read Vice of Kings, was that while he was insisting that there was no evidence in all his research as an occult researcher who doesn't practice occultism or won't talk about it if they do, there was no evidence that occultism in general, specifically Golden Dawn / Crowleyanic OTO rituals, methods, or philosophies or beliefs involved any kind of rationale for or basis for child sexual abuse or sex with children, sexualizing children. That was one of his 3 or 4 central arguments against the questions I was asking. And what I discovered was, in fact, that there is evidence in Crowley's work itself. Obviously, I mean, I knew that already, but I mean, specifically, there was stuff I didn't know about that I discovered through Lavender, talking to Whitley Strieber. It's weird how they leave a trail like this to find the very thing that they seem to be trying to conceal. That is weird. And this was the Star Sapphire ritual, and that in a book by Simon Cabana, aka Peter Lavender, it talks about how the Star Sapphire ritual relates to the vagina dentata, and how sex with a forbidden female is part of this ritualistic working, and one version of the forbidden female, if it's not a mother or a sister, is a pre-menstrual girl. So that's prepubescent. So that's a child. So it's right there in Lavender's early output, except he doesn't admit to being Simon Peter. So at that point, it's sufficient to know. Anyway, that's just to give you the specifics of that example for those who don't know. And the example is, how bad do you want to know? Like, I just really wanted to know. I wanted to find out and to establish and to show that Peter Lavender was full of shit. That he's an occultist, he's a Crowleyite, that he advocates Crowley antics, that he's covering up for Crowley and so on. And then since then he's moved on to the UFOs thing. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else about this. Yeah, somebody recently made commented, or it was an article I read, that there's really no point in trying to catch out these shills with their lies, because they don't care. They just make stuff up. They just lie, and then if you challenge them, they'll just lie about it more, and they'll just move on to another lie, and it doesn't really make a great deal of difference to them, because of course they're not invested in the performance they're giving. They want it to be a good performance. They want to fool people, but if they don't fool somebody, so what? Right? They can just concentrate on the people they can fool. You can't fool all the people all the time. But my counterpoint to this is that, sure, I'm sure it didn't change anything for Peter Lavender directly, maybe indirectly, but for others, if they see me or you or somebody who is actually willing to thrash it out with somebody who's may or may not be being dishonest, misrepresenting and disseminating disinformation, if we're willing to thrash it out in the public sphere or the private sphere and then go public with it, then others will see that, and they will see the response of the person that we're challenging, Lavender in this case, and they can decide for themselves, right? I mean, Lavender agreed that I could share that material, so he was pretty confident. And this was before I discovered the Star Sapphire stuff, right? So in our exchange, he might have felt that he had come out quite well in the argument, and some people did. I certainly didn't, and lots of others didn't. So when people saw how slippery Lavender was being, some people realized, okay, something's off. And the other stuff came up around the same time, because it's Pizzagate, the John Podesta link to Tom DeLonge and Lavender. Other stuff was coming out, timed with that. And then I discovered the Star Sapphire, and that not so many people ever heard about that, because it's in Vice of Kings, which has only sold a few hundred copies. But nonetheless, and that's not the deepest layer anyway, because the deepest layer is it's just a natural human response, just as we naturally respond to sincerity, honesty, suffering, with something that's appropriate, with compassion, with interest, with engagement. You know, we respond to goodness or something that's trying to be good with the goodness within ourselves. So we naturally respond to lies, manipulations, dishonesty, corruption, lack of integrity, malevolence, with something like disgust, essentially. I think that's the best word for it, distaste, and a desire to isolate it, you could say. Like if there's something that's distasteful or contaminated in your environment, you isolate it. You flush it down the fucking toilet. Anyway, not that I flushed Lavender down the toilet, but in my own psyche, or in my own sphere, I did. And I think a number of others did too. And I don't have anything against Peter Lavender personally. This isn't a personal thing. He did piss me off at the time. But right now, I don't. But nor do I have much compassion. I don't have a desire to understand him, or Kripal, or Pasulka. Strieber, yes, I got pretty deep into Strieber's psyche, as he is a man in a lot of suffering. There's a lot of coping mechanisms and displacement activities and bypassing and all that, and he's got himself in a very bad spot. Anyway, I don't think I have much more to say about that. I felt like I wanted to just address that because it was in the subject, but I'm not entirely sure if it was that interesting for listeners. I'm going to take a drink break and catch up on my comments. I'm getting a little tired now, so I've been going an hour and a half. So I was going to drink. I'll catch on the comments. I mean, I'll read them out if they're interesting, so as not to have dead air. We seem to need stories narrative, even if they are complete lies, like good boys and girls before bed. There's not a great deal of comments actually, because is the UFO flat Earth discussion sucking all the oxygen out of the room? What's your opinion of Sean Atwood? I don't have an opinion except besides having talked to him. I didn't find it difficult or repellent or anything. He's professional and he's friendly and seems a little bit sincere. We're just in very different fields. Like even though he's got a huge following, I haven't amplified my signal a great deal by being on Sean Atwood, as it's turned out, because there's too much of a divergence between his audience and mine. Someone's on the up and up or saying when they're able to have a two-way dialogue and is able to question to some degree their own assumptions. Sabbatarianistic, pathological liars never quit. Right, well, I said to my wife today that I'd have to think of the men's club when I was doing men's club. I got men's group and fight club mixed up there. The men's group that I'm running, well, I was doing this because it would motivate me. Because the fact is that actually sitting at a computer and talking to myself in a way, to an invisible audience, there was a lot more interaction last week. Not sure why that is. It's quite tiring, really. It's like I'm extending myself quite a lot. And most people, I guess, do this to sell books and so on. And I certainly haven't plugged my books. Oh, I have 60 Minutes of Hell is available now. I made it available again. For me, the desired outcome of all this stuff, or the way in which it becomes tangible, the results, is through the meeting people online, and specifically currently anyway, but generally, well, sometimes they're mixed, is through the online group work. So I currently have this space on Jitsi. I'm trying to move it to Video Ninja, whatever it's called, but it's a bit iffy. Where there's real good deep work going on, and things are happening that are very surprising. So that's always my hope. That if I reach a bunch of people a bit more than I've reached them before, or people that I haven't reached in a long time, as on YouTube, that at least a couple will be curious to see what's behind the curtain. Not that I'm doing a Wizard of Oz act here or anything like that, but it's not that relaxing to me to do this. I have to be somewhat performative, and it's not interactive. That's the main thing. Whereas it can be, and it was last time. So maybe I'll just shut up and wait for somebody to speak. There's no guarantee that they will. I'm just looking at the list. Yeah, I don't see. Oh.
Actually, I have a question about your men's group, about where you hold it and what are the types of things that you focus on.
Right. Is this Mountain Elf or Leaf Blocks?
Mountain Elf.
Right. Right. So, well, Jitsi is just a program like Zoom, and it's very small in number right now, and it's not a discussion group. It's not a support group. It's not like a Christian or a religious, a theological group. There's a lot of things it's not, but it's kind of a mixture of these things that it's not. Recently, in this latest season of gatherings, there has been a lot of focus on women, surprisingly, actually, because people assume a men's group, they must talk about women all the time, but that hasn't generally been true. There has been quite a lot on that, starting with mothers, partners, siblings, sisters. It's difficult actually, because as I said, I don't want to talk too much about what goes on in that space either, but it is difficult to sum it up, and maybe this is part of my point, that it's a very different kind of part of me that engages in the men's group. It's not primarily intellectual, even though we get together and we talk. That is what happens the whole time. Somebody's talking pretty much the whole time. But it's not an intellectual, it's not an attempt to understand things or work things out intellectually. It's kind of an attempt to discover the ways in which we have been co-opted and compromised as human beings, and then specifically as men, and prevented from living the lives that we might have been living, that God created us to live, or just that we are naturally meant to be living. So I would say that it's like earlier I said, what's the point in researching any of this stuff if it doesn't help you to live a better life? And so I'd say that the men's group is where the rubber of the theory meets the road of the practical. Right? I actually start to apply some of this paranoid awareness to one's daily life and one's daily circumstances, in terms of actually looking at, sharing, and owning up to, and thereby fully seeing and potentially resolving the hooks and the levers and the implants that have been installed in us through the malevolent control system that I presume everybody here is interested in trying to understand. Get them out, get them out of our system. That's kind of my best summation, because it gets left out of the equation. Like, we look at all these agendas and methodologies and groups and trends and all the rest of it, and how they're evil and destructive, and the focus seems to always be on how to change the world. Well, what about ourselves? What about what the actual causes, the ways in which these elements have compromised our own psyches and our bodies and our own relationship to existence? What about looking at that? Right? That's because that's considered a sort of separate psychotherapeutic spirituality, right? It's got this different domain, but to me it's not. It's the same domain, and in fact spirituality and psychotherapy is a second matrix, navel gazing, regurgitating and eating your own vomit kind of stuff, if it isn't grounded in hard so unflinching willingness to look at the reality that we're in socially and in other forms, and vice versa. Like, the willingness to look at the state of the world is also pointless. It's not navel gazing, but it's kind of the flip side of it. It's pointless sort of obsessing on or immersing ourselves in these big picture narratives without actually applying them and grounding them in reality. So I'd say both sides are actually ineffective without the other, and it's very rare that they get combined together. Very rare, I think. I mean, there are definitely people who try it. They tend to become cult leaders. I think actually you get paranoid characters who start spiritual groups. I'm thinking of John Lash. If anyone knows him, I think that got quite cult-like. So I'm not saying it's not tricky, and the men's group isn't really like that, because it's just that people, I mean, obviously it's not like a cult, but I mean, I hope it's not, but I'm saying it's not really quite like I describe it. It's just that the people who come to those groups, they come through my work, so they are naturally interested in and somewhat educated in the state of the world, and a lot of other elements, occultism and psychedelics and these various areas, these things that have been weaponized and used to mess with us. They're just, they found me by navigating the waters of the second matrix. Not so much spirituality. I don't get spiritual seeker people much, unless they're also paranoid. So maybe Christians, quite a few Christians, because they tend to be paranoid. So yeah, so because it's that kind of person who finds me and contacts me, then we all come together with a shared perspective, not like an echo chamber, but basically a shared agreement that the world is a kind of satanic system. That's the way to describe it and understand it. And we don't know what to do about it practically. So that's the when you have a shared basis of understanding, you can then take that much further. You don't have to talk about all that stuff. You can talk more about not necessarily solutions. You don't get straight to that, but how this is manifested in our individual lives, which is often very different. I mean, not necessarily. It's not necessarily that we're aware of being victims of mind control and MK Ultra or Fabianism in my case, or even sexual abuse trauma, because the main elements of hijacking men and women in this system are through sexual trauma. I think it's certainly one of them, if not the one. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about that, although it can. But even if it's a few levels up from the deeper, it doesn't take long to start to see the ways in which we're dysfunctional in the world, and that there are, well, so I got stuck there because I said there are things we can do about it, but actually and this is in the Dodcast with Luke Dodson, just coming together with kindred spirits with that orientation, that in itself is doing something about it. So it's almost as though you're actually participating in manifesting a solution just by entering into the space. But then the talking is a way to just become more conscious that actually, okay, we can work our way through this together. Individually, I don't think we can. So hopefully that gave some sense of what to expect.
That's great. I appreciate it.
Sure. Why are you thinking of attending?
Well, yeah, and I mean, coincidentally, in my local community, a couple people have been coaxing me to put together a similar thing, and I just think it's funny and synchronistic that joining your spaces and getting more familiar with your stuff you mentioned it last week as well. I was like, oh man, that's so interesting. So I just wanted to get my head around what you're talking about, and I totally agree in so many cases. I mean, I think there's a very particular approach to the masculine that has been a specific type of alienating for folks, and also a lot of the maybe mainstream or subconscious solutions seem to be a little bit unattainable just for all these different reasons. Like maybe we consider things like thought form, influence, egregoric things, social things, all these types of things that really make the game silly when it's actually about small, simple, day-to-day, aspects of flow and creation and all the little roles we're supposed to play in life. So yeah, no, I mean that's really interesting. The scope to what you're speaking to, and I'd probably definitely like to learn a little bit more about joining in.
Great. Well, for those who are interested, it's currently it's free for paid subscribers at Children of Job, but I haven't. Nobody who's not a paid subscriber has asked to join, I don't think yet. So I guess it just means become a paid subscriber and you can come. I guess it's €9 a month or whatever it is. Because I don't really want to charge specifically for the space, and it is 6:30 p.m. on a Friday evening, currently UK time. And I might be, I mean, I'm trying to get one going in a different time zone for people in Australia specifically, but that just seems to be because it's impossible for people in Australia for this evening time, which is around 8 a.m. UK time, but I don't know what day. So, and if you're interested, if anyone's interested, just send me an email, Jason with a U at protonmail.com. We'll see. You know, because I mean, I was doing it for a few years, but it was connected to the Dave Oshana thing, and that gave it its own momentum. And now I'm not sure how much momentum it has. I mean, so far it's going very well, but I'm not sure how long it will continue. That will depend on how long it takes the current participants to feel that they've got what they needed, because you know, don't expect anyone to keep coming back indefinitely, although they certainly can. So that means a kind of influx of new people. And so one of the things that I'm well, people know, I think, I'm always trying to get rid of the fourth wall and just end the performance aspect and just have this interactive process as much as possible, to have it to be an interactive process of equals rather than an audience call with people. But I can't have that without the other. I can't have this interactive process without having a platform and putting material out there. And I know that the vast majority want to remain passive audience members, which is perfectly fine. I perfectly understand it. It's just that I'm not so interested in. I mean, I love writing anyway, so I guess I'm perfectly happy to put the material out. But I'm still trying to fathom, and we've talked about this in the men's group, why it is that such a tiny percentage that actually makes it all the way through the very simple hoops and hurdles that I create. There aren't many. I mean, there is a sobriety thing. I don't want people who are drinking and smoking or doing drugs before the thing. Generally speaking, it's better, I think, if people aren't doing those things, but I'm fairly loose about it as long as they're not doing them leading up to the meeting. That's a hurdle that some people object to, even on principle, right? Even if it's doesn't apply to them. And then, well, that's about it, really, actually. So then I think it's more in terms of just not knowing what to expect, really, why they would want to do that, why they would want to join some mysterious men's group. And I think the whole thing of a men's group has it's sort of it's not that it's got a bad rap, but unfortunately it's very like cliche, but you have to experience it to really find out why it is worthwhile. It's very difficult to sell it or describe it. Or at least I haven't managed to do it. It's just I've simply found time and time again that men find that they can actually find themselves much more free to express themselves and to feel good about themselves and to be who they are when women aren't around, when they're surrounded by men, essentially. And they feel there's a kind of support which isn't emotional support, it's a kind of energetic support whereby we discover new sides of ourselves that we hadn't discovered because we hadn't wanted them to be seen with women around. So something like that, but I'm not sure that sells it very well. I don't feel I can sell it really, just that it's been enormously valuable to me, so I'm always keen to introduce it to others. Anyway, I think I'm losing my voice a bit. As I say, it's extremely hot here. We're having something like a heat wave. So I'm going to wind up, at least in the next 9 minutes. That would be a 2-hour meeting, but probably sooner than that. So I will just leave it open for a little while, just in case anyone wants to jump in with anything before I sign off. I'm not sure if I'm still on YouTube because it is frozen up. The screen has frozen up. So I might not still be on YouTube. Let's see if
I mean, aside from Leafbox, who I think might not be in the same position to speak, I mean, I have a couple just personal curiosity questions from stuff that you've mentioned. I hope that doesn't take things off the rails or anything from what your topics are today. But I noticed that you spoke a little bit about energy work previously, and I wonder if you'd talk a little bit more about what your personal relationship with it is. Do you practice, or are you just receiving, or how does that work for you?
Well, I mentioned energy work recently just because I said I'd done some that day and it was an odd thing, so I didn't do it anymore. But that's a reference to something that David Sharna taught, which was to do with energetic hygiene, so clearing out toxins in the body that aren't necessarily physical toxins related. Well, they would also be relating to what we eat and drink, but subtler, to do with thoughts and emotions that get stuck in the body, or that leave toxins in the body, or create toxins that get stuck in the body. There are just a bunch of moves that are really simple. It's not like tensegrity or something, like shaking and patting. A lot of it's just sort of intuitive. If you feel gunky, you want to get the gunk out of your system, but it's a subtler kind of gunk. It's not just doing a sauna, although that would work too. That's all I was referring to, kind of a bunch of physical moves that just help to clear the energy, the stuck energy in the body, so that the energy that the energy of the body can flow and distribute itself properly through the body. There are moves beyond that, but I mean it's not something. No, it's not something that I practice. I like to think, and to some extent seems true, that doing more and more work, physical work, it is suitable as energy work. Even though that's not true some of the time, because I can have a bad posture, I can strain myself. Lifting heavy things isn't really that good for the body. No, weightlifters think it is, but I'm not so sure. But anyway, walking and swimming, being in nature, and then physical work on the land, I'm pretty confident at this stage that that's enough for me to keep energetically clear. Relatively.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I think you said a couple or so.
That was sort of mostly where my mind was going. I mean, I guess following